What's up everybody, it's Brandon and welcome back to another episode of Murata Media. And so today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to be reviewing a movie that just came out. No, today I'm going to be reviewing a TV show. And I think you can all guess what TV show I'm going to be reviewing. Whiskey Cavalier, of course. I'm just messing with you. Today I'm going to be reviewing the 8th and final season of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is easily one of the most critically acclaimed television shows of all time, my personal favorite TV show, and season 8 has easily been the most polarizing season thus far between fans and critics alike. So today I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, of things that I liked and things that I didn't quite like. So starting off, the first couple of episodes were pretty well received by both fans and critics, and I think everybody's opinion started to take a dip a little bit in episode 3, which was The Long Night. This is the episode that contained the Battle of Winterfell. I personally enjoyed this episode. I thought it was pretty great for the most part, except for the atrocious lighting. But other than that, I actually enjoyed this episode. I thought it was epic, I thought it was very entertaining, and it had really great action sequences. And there were a few notable characters that died in this episode, some of them being Beric Dondarrion. He was kind of a secondary character in my opinion. He kind of just got pushed off to the sidelines, and we didn't really know much about him, but either way, he did die a hero protecting Arya and Sandor. Lyanna Mormont is another character that died in this episode, and I thought her death was pretty epic. I mean, she died killing an undead giant. I mean, if you're gonna go anyway, that's definitely gonna be the way to go. But the two biggest deaths in the episode were easily Jorah and Theon. Jorah died while protecting Daenerys while they were both running back to Winterfell. And to tell you the truth, I was honestly satisfied with Jorah's death. Their relationship definitely blossomed throughout the years, and Dany went through that phase where she hated him because she found out he was a mole who was sent to kill her. And I also felt that Dany never really appreciated Jorah to the full extent. I mean, this man loved her. He would have died for her, and he did. And then in that moment, she realized what she had lost, and she didn't really appreciate him until he was gone. The other death of a big character was Theon. And Theon, I actually thought, had a great ending to his arc as well, because there was that phase in one of the earlier seasons where he's trying to take over Winterfell and he tries to kill Bran and Rickon. And this ultimately comes back to bite him, and he learns a lot in the process, and he volunteers to protect Bran during the fight. And then when the Night King finally enters, and Theon realizes that he's about to die, and with his last words, he apologizes to Bran for everything he did. And Bran says to him that everything he did led him to this point, which was home. And Winterfell, in a way, always was home to Theon. The Starks took him under their wing, and they treated him as if he was their own family. And I really thought it was a fitting ending for him to die protecting the boy that he once tried to kill, because in that moment, he realized everything he had done led him up to this point, and in this one moment he had a chance to redeem himself. But then there was that one big death right at the end of the episode. Yeah, I'm talking about the Night King. Right after the Night King kills Theon, he goes to kill Bran, and there's kind of a pause, and then Arya comes out of nowhere like a bat out of hell, but the Night King sees this coming and stops her and holds her by her throat. Arya takes the knife and drops it from her left hand to her right hand and stabs the Night King, and with one stab of the blade, boom, the Night King and the White Walkers are all gone. And that honestly was one of my biggest criticisms with this episode, is that it seemed that killing the Night King and the White Walkers was a little bit too easy. I mean, they did spend 7 seasons building up this threat as if they were some unstoppable force, and they were killed just like that. I mean, that storyline of the White Walkers did have to end somehow, but I don't know, I thought it was just a little bit too easy. But other than that, I thought The Long Night was an entertaining episode. It did have some flaws, but yeah, I enjoyed it. So following that episode is where everything really started to take a turn, the last of the Starks. I didn't hate this episode as much as other people did. I mean, I thought it was decent. And I think my biggest criticism of this episode was Jaime. Jaime Lannister was easily my favorite character in the entire show. I thought he was the most well-rounded, I thought he was the best written, and I really loved where his character was going. So him and Brienne finally have sex after there was a long hinted at romance throughout the series that they finally capitalized on. But I thought Jaime's romance with Brienne, it kind of went nowhere. I mean, Yes, there was kind of that hint they were into each other throughout the whole show, but I don't know, I felt they either should have ended up as lovers or they shouldn't have at all. And then almost immediately Jaime leaves her and says he's going back to Cersei. And in that moment I was actually excited. Why? Because I thought he was going to King's Landing so he could kill Cersei. I thought that would have been the perfect ending for his character, but no, unfortunately, that's not what happened. And that leads us to probably the most controversial episode of the season, The Bells. And this is the episode where everything finally starts to come down. At the end of The Last of the Starks, Cersei has the Mountain behead Missandei, and you could tell this really hurt Dany because Missandei is also one of the most loyal people who followed her up until this point. And as she walks away, the camera's just on her, and you could tell that shit really is about to go down. And it went so down that everybody was really confused. Both the Unsullied, Dothraki, and all of Dany's forces storm King's Landing, and they win pretty easily. But when the bells start to sound, indicating that the city has surrendered, Dany just starts burning down the city and killing innocent people. And this confused the hell out of a lot of people, myself included, especially in the moment, because this seemed to be going backwards from where Dany started from. I mean, she freed slaves, she freed cities, she empowered people who were disempowered throughout the entire show, and then you're just gonna go and have her burn down an entire city and kill innocents after they had already surrendered? But then I slept on it, I thought about it a little bit, and I think more and more I understood her descent into madness. Because throughout the show, Dany had a tendency to kill people who she felt wronged her, or people who she felt were against her. And she felt that the people of King's Landing were against her because they followed Cersei. And on top of that, her most loyal advisors were dropping like flies. Varys had betrayed her and thought Jon was the rightful king. Jorah had died in the Battle of Winterfell. And Cersei beheaded Missandei. And on top of that, she found out, I believe in the second episode, who Jon actually was. And in reality, Jon was the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. So everything that she had worked for up until this point might have been taken away from her. The rug might have been swept right from underneath her feet. So when you add all the people that she lost just in this short amount of time, and then on top of that, everything that she wanted, the one thing that she wanted, might be taken away from her from someone who really didn't work for it. And I mean, she couldn't handle that, and there were hints throughout the whole series that, yeah, she was gonna go Mad Queen. In the moment, I definitely understand where people are coming from with this, but I actually understood it in a way. But another big problem that I had with this episode, as I mentioned in the last episode, was Jaime, and specifically Jaime's death. Jaime goes to the castle and he tries to get Cersei out. They end up going down to the tombs where all the dragon bones are kept, and the castle is collapsing on top of them. And in that moment, Cersei showed vulnerability for probably the first time since her children died, pleading with Jaime that she doesn't want to die like this, and Jaime says it doesn't matter, all that matters is us. And I was a little bit pissed off about this. I mean, Jaime had grown so much as a character up until this point, and now he's going to go back to Cersei and save her life. It just felt wrong to me. I mean, in a way, I kind of understand, because Jaime always loved Cersei. Even through all the stuff that she's done, he admitted that he still loves her. His death didn't feel like the fulfilling death that he deserved. And also, as I mentioned, in that moment, Cersei displayed fear, and she displayed vulnerability. And you kind of sympathize with her. And you're thinking, you've gone 7 seasons of this show hating Cersei, only for her last moments to have you kind of caring about her. I thought about that a little bit, and I thought it was kind of an interesting twist. Because Dany is outside burning the city to the ground. You spent 7 seasons loving her, and 7 seasons hating Cersei. So in this last moment, the roles are kind of reversed a little bit. And it makes you think, who actually is the monster here? And I don't know, I just thought that was a really interesting contrast. But one thing about this episode that I actually loved was the end of Sandor Clegane. Arya and Sandor are rushing up the castle to kill Cersei. Sandor could tell that there's imminent danger and he tells Arya to go back. But she's so intent on killing Cersei, and Sandor in that moment takes her and says that revenge got him where he is, and he doesn't want Arya to end up like him. And Arya stays behind and thanks him before he leaves forever. Throughout the whole series, him and Arya had a really love-hate relationship, and you could tell as the series progressed that Sandor really began to love Arya as if she was his own daughter. And then after that was the long-awaited Clegane Bowl, and it was a pretty epic fight, I've gotta say. It was well choreographed, and it got pretty brutal. And then Gregor has Sandor up against the wall, pushing in his eyes the same way that he killed Oberyn Martell, only for Sandor to stab him in the head and then tackle him through the wall of the castle to fall down into the flames below to their death. And I mean, it is only fitting that Sandor died by fire. Another critique that I had of the episode was Euron Greyjoy. He was a pretty one-dimensional villain. I mean, you really didn't sympathize with him. He was just kind of a forgettable character, and when he died, you really didn't bat an eye. You kind of just moved on to the next scene. And that brings us to the final episode, the Iron Throne. So after Dany's rampage on the city, all of her followers kind of go their separate ways throughout the city, and I particularly love Tyrion's scene when he goes to the tombs and he finds Jaime and Cersei just crushed underneath all of the bricks that fell on top of them, and Tyrion starts weeping. And I thought it was a very heartbreaking scene, because even though Cersei treated him like crap throughout his whole life, he still loved her because she was family. And I mean, Jaime was the only person who actually treated Tyrion like another person. He didn't treat him like garbage. He didn't treat him like he was lesser. He always treated him as an equal, as a brother. And Tyrion just lost the only two people that he pretty much had left in this world, and I thought it was a really powerful scene. And I really can't say enough about Tyrion. He's easily one of the show's best characters, and I actually loved that he gave up being Dany's hand after he had found his brother and sister like that. Because in that moment, he realized all the mistakes that he had made. He was pretty much the reason that Cersei and Jaime died. And after Dany makes him prisoner, there's a great scene with him and Jon, and where Tyrion expresses all the regrets that he had in his life and admits the mistakes that he's made. Because throughout the whole show, Tyrion really only listened to himself. He didn't really listen to other people. So it was definitely nice for him to finally realize that he isn't always right, and people have died as a result of his decisions in the past. And then after that, Jon goes to the Red Keep to find Dany admiring the Iron Throne because it was the first time that she had ever seen it. And after a brief conversation, Jon ends her life. And I actually love that it was Jon who killed Dany, because like Tyrion, he believed in her and then started to question her and himself when he realized everything that she had done. And the next scene I thought was actually really great. Drogon, Dany's remaining dragon, flies into the Red Keep and finds his mother dead. He starts to nudge at her and realize that she is in fact dead, and he gives Jon this look like, "You monster, I'm gonna kill you." But instead he burns the Iron Throne. But in the moment you're thinking, wait, what? But then afterwards I realized that it actually did make sense, because Drogon was smart enough to realize that Jon wasn't the one who actually killed Dany. It was her power for the Iron Throne. It took over her and it made her a different person, which led Jon to kill her. And Drogon basically said, if she can't have it, then nobody can. And then he flies away with her lifeless body. Well, I didn't really understand why he flew away with her or where they were going. I thought that was a great scene. And after Dany's death, all of the lords from all the different cities meet at King's Landing to discuss who the new ruler of the Seven Kingdoms will be. And yeah, as all of you know who have watched the show, they ended up choosing Bran. And I mean, I gotta say, I'm a little happy that a guy named Brandon ended up ruling the Seven Kingdoms. But that was another criticism that I had with the episode. Like, we spent 8 seasons trying to decide who the next ruler of the Seven Kingdoms would be, and they chose a new one in like 5 minutes? But I am happy that it wasn't Jon or Dany who ended up on the Iron Throne, because I felt that would have been a little bit too predictable. But it also made me think, if Jon didn't end up as king, what was the point of introducing him as a Targaryen? One of the criticisms I've heard is that this was totally useless, but I disagree, because him being a Targaryen and being the rightful heir helped drive Dany's madness, and it was also hinted throughout the entire show that Jon was not who he actually was, and they needed to make him something more interesting. So yes, I get it, but I feel they could have gone into his backstory as a Targaryen a little bit more, instead of just using it as a ploy to drive the story forward. After Bran is chosen as king, he has his council set in place, with Tyrion being his hand. I was kind of hoping that Tyrion wouldn't accept the role as hand after everything that he had just gone through, but I also did like it because he's surrounded by people that he trusts. The other people in the council were Bronn, Davos, Brienne, and Sam. And I actually love that all of them ended up in this position, because that's what they were working towards. Sam dreamed of being a Grand Maester, and Brienne always wanted to be a knight, and Jaime even knighted her in episode 2. And I thought it was only fitting that Brienne was writing Jaime's story in that book that included all the stories of the knights who had perished, because even though he did leave her abruptly, she was one of the only people who saw the good in him, and she was forever indebted to him because he saved her life and because he made her fulfill her dream. And in fact, guys, I didn't mind the ending to this show at all. It seems most people hated it, and I mean, that's fine, you can. I thought it was a nice change of pace from the usual dark storylines that we see, and in this moment, the show actually had a somewhat happy ending. And there was a great headline to an article that I saw, and I can't remember who wrote it, and I wish I could give them credit, but whoever it is, I think this is so spot on. After Game of Thrones talked about the cold darkness of winter, in this finale, it dared to dream of spring, because I actually liked where everybody ended up, especially the Stark children. Bran is the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Sansa seceded Winterfell to be its own city so it wouldn't have to fall under the rule of the Seven Kingdoms. Arya went off on her own to explore whatever was west of Westeros, in her words. And Jon went back to Castle Black with Tormund and lived among the wildlings. And I thought this was a great ending for all of them, because it's kind of what they wanted the entire time. Yes, with the exception of Bran, I get that, because Sansa grew so much as a character up until this point, and I think it was only right for her to be the queen in the north. Arya was always off on her own, and she dared to go places that no one else would go, so I loved that she went off to explore the world. And I've heard a lot of criticisms for Jon's ending to live with the wildlings, and while I do understand them, when Jon was a wildling the first time and he fell in love with Ygritte, it seems like that's where he was at his happiest. He got to be free and not live under anyone's rule except his own. And he also petted Ghost in the end, so I mean, you can't go wrong with that. And my last point is that the show really came full circle, because the last shot you see is Jon leaving Castle Black and going into the wild with all the other wildlings. And if you remember the very first episode of this show, the first shot that you see are these 3 men entering Castle Black. So I thought that was a great callback to where it started and where it ended. In fact, the whole episode was full of great callbacks and hints that you may have missed. There's a great article I read from Insider that goes over all of them. I'll link that down below so you guys can read it. But the thing that I thought was beautiful about this ending was that the show began with the Starks and it ended with the Starks. Like, the story was basically all about them. They came out on top because they were the superior family. And I'm pretty sure Ned and Catelyn are very proud of them for it. But in the end, guys, I totally understand everyone's criticisms with this season and why they didn't like it. There were several things I didn't like myself that I tried to look past, but I just can't. But overall, the final season of Game of Thrones, for me at least, was kind of a good one. But I really do applaud the show for taking the risks that it did And after I thought about it, isn't that what made this show great? Isn't what made Game of Thrones great the fact that they did the exact opposite of what you wanted them to do? And I don't know, maybe I am pushing it a little bit here, but that was one of my biggest takeaways. Was this season awful? No. Rushed? Yes, absolutely. I feel if the show had more episodes and they had more time to flesh out these plot points and the decisions they made, then we probably would have understood them more. And even though it was not the greatest ending to a remarkable show that we all fell in love with, it wasn't awful, and it did have some good things going for it. And for that reason, I'm gonna give Game of Thrones Season 8 a 6 out of 10. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and just remember that this is my opinion. If you disagree with me, that's perfectly okay. If you agree with everything I just said, that's awesome too. But other than that, if you guys haven't seen my past reviews, I'll link those right over here. If you like this video, slap a like on it, and don't forget to subscribe. And I will see you guys next time.